It is our human nature to support the communities that we are a part of. There are a lot of hateful people in this world, but it is within our human nature that we find the courage to come together as groups in order to defend ourselves from these hateful people. However, there are certain people within these groups who find themselves in a weird position, and they find it within their own self-interest to advocate against the common interest of the group that they are supposed to be representing.
Today is part 3 of a series called Triggering Trannies on my channel, in which we sit back, relax, point and laugh at the trans people online.
Now, first of all, I wouldn't call this person a pretty face, but that is my personal opinion. Put your thoughts down below. I do not believe this is a trans woman.
What do you think of people who equate the word nigger with the word tranny, or say that the word tranny is an offensive slur just like nigger? It's completely stupid to equate the word tranny with the word nigger. You know, the word nigger has such a long history. To say that it's like on the same level as nigger is absolutely stupid.
Triggering Trannies.
So this uncancelable merch, because I am uncancelable just like all of my audience. I am uncancelable.
Sure, Jan.
This is the heart of Blaire White's content. When you look at her channel, you see that despite being a transgender woman herself, the majority of her videos revolve around tearing other transgender women apart.
And she called me a man and proceeded to tell me that men couldn't hit women. And she just started like going at me, and I was like, I don't even know what this is for.
You were particularly annoying. So I don't know if you feel like that's a badge of honor or like what, but...
It was really wild and strange. And I noticed a trend of Blaire basically finding these weird, obscure, oftentimes creepy and like socially awkward trans people.
Non-binary people are not new. We are not trendy.
You know what? I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna make fun of this person's appearance. We're just gonna disagree on ideas.
And just saying like, this is why the trans community is seen as like terrible and predators and all these things.
What drives someone to engage in this behavior? Throughout this video, I want to try to understand Blaire White as well as uncovering some of her best kept secrets. Now I know what you're thinking. There are many videos about Blaire White on YouTube. However, as some of my longtime viewers might know, I only make videos if I genuinely believe that the majority of information provided in this video is revolutionary, breaks new ground, and has not been talked about by anyone else on YouTube. This is a video full of fresh takes, new points, different perspectives you've never heard before. You see, I'm not necessarily interested in Blaire's political beliefs.
Find me a non-binary, agender, gray gender who's not a fucking feminist. Find me one who's not an SJW. Find me one who's not a leftist. You won't.
I'm bigender. That means that I physically want to be both male and female. I myself am pretty libertarian. I've personally met conservative non-binary people, and of course there's the liberal ones that she often makes videos about. It's important to point out that non-binary people can come from all walks of the political spectrum.
What I'm interested in is the blatant misinformation that she's sharing and the way that she harms her own community, because I myself am a transgender woman. I used to be a huge fan of her channel. I know how Blaire is feeling in a way that a lot of these other YouTubers don't. When I look at Blaire, I see part of myself in her, because I once was just like Blaire.
Your original thing that you said in the video that you sent me was, there needs to be a distinction between non-binary people and transgender people. Do you agree with that?
I 100% agree with that. They're two different things, right? If you have someone who doesn't claim to be either gender and someone who claims to be one gender and who's on the binary, I think calling it the same term and using the same term interjectively for both of those things is just not good to do. If you're a non-binary person and you use the word non-binary, it's a more accurate descriptor of what you are, so why use the word transgender?
Where do I even begin? There's many places, but the one thing that I want to start this video off with is something that I think a lot of people missed. The video that I'm going to be referring to doesn't seem to mention a lot, and if it is, people don't usually see anything wrong with it. But there's something that I particularly noticed in the video that I don't think anyone else did, and when you watch this clip, I think you'll notice it too. But this clip alone is one of the most revealing clips that I've ever seen.
Because shockingly, or maybe to you shockingly, Sophia, much of the world views you as a I'm a trans woman, and much of the world views me as a I grew up a and in the eyes of many, you're also a Not saying I think that, but that's the tea. Sophia is probably so horrified that much of the world still views her as a gay man. A very large chunk of people just view us as gay men, right? So I think she has such a deep self-hatred for the fact that she is viewed that way and how she may even in some ways feel that way, that she wants other gay men to be punished. She wants other gay men, other gay men, other gay men.
Notice the casual other gay men. Why did Blaire say other gay men in the way that she did? Doing so clearly implies that she believes that this woman is a gay man. But what this says to me is just how casually she can slip of the tongue. It shows you her real intentions. This is what she really thinks of people, her own kind. You know, just another trans woman. She has no problem with essentially calling this transgender woman someone who's dealt with so much trauma, someone who clearly wants to just be seen as a woman. She slips and calls her a gay man, and she leaves it in the video, acts like nothing happened.
Because you know anything about Blaire's past, she grew up and she always presented as very feminine, so she was bullied a lot as a kid, and now she fits into this role of womanhood and femininity very well, and I think she's enjoying being the one that's accepted, that's on top now.
I haven't seen a single comment about it. I don't think anyone noticed or cared. But what I noticed is this woman who, in this video, you know, she had a YouTube channel, and I went to that YouTube channel, and right after Blaire posted her video, the people in her comment section would constantly call her a gay man. They would, you know, because she was homophobic, right? A trans woman who's homophobic. Obviously that's wrong, right? Like, I'm not denying that. But the issue is that the people would come straight from Blaire's video, and they would come from Blaire's video to be transphobic. They wanted to hit her where it hurts, and they knew that it would hurt her to be transphobic. This is Blaire White's own audience being transphobic to another trans woman because of a video that Blaire White made on her. And I don't know if Blaire didn't notice or didn't care. She never made a single comment saying that she didn't condone this behavior. Nothing. She acted like it never happened. She enabled this behavior. She allowed it to continue. This video is still up to this day. And it's not necessarily that what she's saying in this video was wrong, because it's not. But Blaire doesn't seem to understand the unintended consequences that can happen. The way that she framed this video enabled the transphobes in her comments to be transphobic to this transgender woman. You may not like the things that she's done, but that does not defend what Blaire did. I was absolutely appalled when I saw this. I'm a transgender woman. I notice things that people don't notice.
No, Blaire said that she thinks she's not like a real woman before.
Which is weird.
But she probably still thinks like trans people are cringe, and that's why the right hates us. Nothing positive. Never gives props to trans people ever.
I know that she has like a few videos where she's like, oh, look at this cringy non-binary person. Look at that cringy non-binary person.
If someone asks you to use they, them pronouns, just do it.
No, I'll probably avoid you like the plague if you ask me to do that. I mean, I'm not going to be rude about it, but I'm also not going to go out of my way to interact with you for a number of reasons.
You can't expect people to use language in a completely different way than they're accustomed to just for your comfortability, especially if it's a special pronoun like they and them. You cannot get butthurt that people don't walk around using they and them in a singular form.
I kind of feel like she's never really met a non-binary person before. I feel like she's never gotten a chance to talk to a person with atypical dysphoria, because I feel like if she did, she might have a different opinion.
I don't understand how you can be non-binary and trans. Like, isn't the whole point of being transgender like transitioning into something? I thought non-binary was like, I don't fucking know.
She once described it as going from point A to point A, and she describes being trans as going from point A to point B. And she doesn't really account for non-binary people like me who go from point A to point C.
You guys are to trans people as Rachel Dolezal was to Black women. A cheap impersonation. You guys don't transition. You guys are not diagnosed with gender dysphoria, which is the mental illness that trans people have.
There are dysphoric non-binary people. There's people who want neither sex characteristics. There's people who want both sets of sex characteristics. There's people who want like a combination.
So now that we've talked about everything that is scientifically valid, let's address this other shit. Non-binary. You guys call yourself trans and you're not. Newsflash, you are not transgender just because you cut your hair short and prefer they, them pronouns. You people simply want to call yourself transgender to earn oppression points. Not one of these new genders of the week are scientifically valid. That is the difference between all that other shit and transsexuals. Being transgender is medically diagnosable. The non-binary gender identity is not substantiated by science whatsoever.
Atypical gender dysphoria is explicitly included in the DSM-5.
So far we've kind of touched the waters on Blaire White and the psychology behind why what she's doing. But I want to really dive deep into her mind and why she feels the way that she does and why she acts the way that she does, because as a trans woman, at the end of the day, I just want to understand her. I just want to help her. This video isn't about canceling her. This video is just talking about my own personal issues with her. And at the end of this, I'm hoping she can learn from her mistakes and grow as a person. The problem is, like the title suggests, Blaire White hasn't learned anything. And that's a sad conclusion to come to, because she's had so many opportunities to become a better person. And she's shown moments where she looked like she might have.
Point blank, my perception that Riley was lying about being trans or pretending to be trans was just incorrect. And for me to not come on here and correct that after the amount of response videos I made where I assert just that, one of them being just less than 2 weeks ago, would be wrong. Riley's video really got me thinking, and I feel bad. The incessant push to prove that Riley was not trans, I'm just realizing was probably really hurtful.
But she continues to spread harmful information. In my opinion, it's only gotten worse. And the problem is that it's so deeply ingrained into her that she's not just harming other trans women now, she's harming the way that she views herself. Just look at one of her most recent videos.
I wonder if they're a real doctor or like a Dr. But Joe Biden doctor.
I don't think this is a doctor.
But it says doctor.
If this, well, you know, I also call myself a woman.
The whole butt of the joke, the point of the joke is that she's not a woman. The absolute denial of the trans experience, the absolute denial of her own gender identity. The only reasonable interpretation of this is that Blaire doesn't really see herself as a woman, which is so sad and heartbreaking to me, because Blaire is a woman and she's just as much of a woman as any other woman. Although Blaire White herself might not actually believe this, it was the insinuation that that made trans women somehow less of a woman that I had an issue with. But it's really only here that we see the full extent of her beliefs.
It's a thing that you see in every minority group. There's always the pick me of every group. It's a defensive tactic that if you're a group that's discriminated against, then maybe if you do the discrimination, then they won't look at you. They'll just go past you. They'll still come for Blaire. She'll just be the last one.
Maybe to some people, it was an off comment. It was a joke, but it was still a joke rooted in Blaire White not really seeing herself as a woman. Blaire White insisting on this distinction of trans women and cisgender women. This distinction that trans women are different. We will never be the same. We are not fully women, and that distinction is important. It's the same kind of mindset that I see so often from TERFs or trans exclusionary radical feminists. See this comment, possibly another slip up, also possibly purely intentional. The way she says it, I don't know if she's just trying to blend into her environment or not. I don't know if this is really how she feels. After all, it is a joke, but behind every joke there is a sense of truth or how somebody really feels. An alt-writer who makes racist jokes is probably a racist person as well. The types of jokes you tell says a lot about your character and who you are.
I feel like this is too serious. Trans people are marginalized, and there's a lot of people that are trying to pass laws right now that discriminate against us. So we need her to stand up and be real and not just try to grift for this whatever the fuck she's doing. It just doesn't make sense. It's just for a bag.
Exactly.
This is serious shit. This is our lives.
This comment to me is where the mask really comes off. The point where Blaire stops pretending that she is being a positive influence to trans people. She may still believe in her heart and her mind that she is helping trans people when she believes she needs to make transphobic jokes about herself, where she thinks it's funny that she tries to be a woman. She thinks it's funny that she calls herself a woman. What this says to me is that there's a deep underlying insecurity hiding underneath.
I'll never forget this one thing that really stuck to me. Blaire White had quote tweeted this person who looks like a minor and said she put a makeup beard on herself and called herself trans. This is like trans face. And to me, it's just such a shocking thing to say, because not only is that a completely common and normal way to cope with gender dysphoria, but it was also a child and she also misgendered them.
That's so fucked up.
Like, why? Just like because they don't pass? Because it's a kid who doesn't pass? Because I think a lot of people don't realize that within, like, that is a recommended thing, that especially people who are minors who can't be on testosterone, right? Like, pre-testosterone, I didn't have any facial hair. I did makeup beards. I even wore them to school. I didn't get made fun of. People were pretty respectful. They knew that I was non-binary.
That's like making fun of a trans woman because, oh no, she put on makeup on her face. Oh no, she's wearing a wig. You can't even grow long hair. Like, this is what people do when they're early in their transition. Growing facial hair can be hard. There are cisgender men who do not have facial hair. Some people have to like get certain treatments for that.
Behind all of these videos, there's a very hurt, troubled woman who just wants to fit in, just wants to be seen as normal by society. And instead of trying to be a positive influence, the hurt, the frustration of years of not being seen as the woman she is, she feels that in order to be seen this way, that this is what she has to do. And the most heartbreaking thing is that it's working.
It's just unfortunate with Blaire is that no one has to care, and I think she just doesn't care. So until she cares, like, what's the extent of the conversation that can even be had? We're just gonna say you're harming people, and she's gonna be like, well, but I'm making money. She doesn't care. No one in the world has to care. That's why the world sucks. It's because no one's required to care. So a lot of people just don't. But it's morally right to care.
And as long as it continues to work for her, she will continue to reclude to this pattern of behavior. The more she makes fun of other transgender women, the more acceptance she gets from society. Transphobic people who would never accept a transgender person will accept her, and she will see that as progress, because it is for herself, but it's not progress for trans people. It's the opposite. And if you are in her place, if you were making money, if you were getting love and praise every day doing this, would you do the same thing? It's easy to say no, but love, attention, fame, money, it's a hard thing to pass on. And none of us truly know what we would do presented in her situation. I don't think that Blaire's a bad person. I just think that she's been misguided, has deep feelings of resentment, and this is just the path that life has put her down. The way people have reacted to her has taught her that this is what she needs to be doing, that this is what's best for her. And as long as people keep watching and keep supporting her, this is probably what she'll continue to do, unless she has a deep, honest conversation with herself. And I want to be a part of that conversation for change.
I don't think she's evil or like this horrible, awful person that a lot of people in the non-binary community make her out to be. My first introduction to Blaire was that I actually did like her content. I liked that someone was talking about Jessica Yaniv, who wasn't a transphobic person, you know, since a lot of the people raising the alarms about Jessica Yaniv were trans exclusionary radical feminists. Using her as an example, this is the boogeyman that we tried to warn you about. I was so thankful that Blaire was someone with a platform who talked about Jessica Yaniv, raised awareness without being fear-mongering. And that's when I became a fan. And then I found out, of course, her views on non-binary people. I definitely don't agree with her.
In the same video, she also does something else shocking.
Explain to me what trans masculine is.
I wish I knew all this.
Well, aren't you the expert on this stuff?
It's impossible for me to be. Part of the reason why this is so funny is because I don't understand it, and I'm trans, so I should understand, right? Well, it's all very desperate. It's all very desperate.
Trans masculine is essentially being a trans man, being a masculine transgender person. It is by no means radical. It is by no means dog gender, cat gender, ice cream gender. It is a very simple and basic term, yet Blaire is so stuck in her ways that she sees something as simple, as basic, as non-controversial and straightforward as trans masculine, and she views it as just as bad, just as crazy, just as woke as all the other stuff. There's no nuance. It was just shocking to hear this because she should know better. She's been doing these videos for so many years. She has to know what that word transmasculine means. She has to know that it's not extreme, but yet she acts like it is. Why?
Blaire might be a little bit worse because Calvin has told me that she is not the same way she is on YouTube as she is IRL, in which case I would actually say that's morally impugnable to spread content which like actually harms people and to do so intentionally, even if you know that you may be spreading things that are not true. I think that that's actually worse. Like, I think that if you genuinely believe something and you spread bad information, I think that that's like bad. But like, I think it's much worse to spread ideas you know to be wrong and to do it for a profit, even if they end up harming people.
I'm gonna say this, I've talked to some people she's friends with. This can't be confirmed because it's hearsay, but I've heard from people that she knows in real life that like, she doesn't believe most of what she's saying. It's just a grift, like for the right.
What is she faking about? Like, what have you heard? Like the political stuff? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's more so like the extent. Like, she's definitely like right leaning and she definitely has transphobic views. But I think she definitely plays it up in like certain instances where she knows she's lying. Like, there was that whole situation with the drag queen story hour, and then the person that she put on the thumbnail was like a different person. It wasn't even that person. She probably knows like she's doing that.
And then there was also the situation where she was talking about a trans athlete and she totally misrepresented the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, she was talking about like how she was competing against cis women. Meanwhile, she's like, literally, I haven't even done this. Like, what are you doing? You're just lying about me. If you don't want to expose your source, that's fine. But like, how do you know that they're close to Blaire? How do you know that this information is legit, right?
Yeah, it's coming with someone that she's like done videos with in the past. Like, that's all I'll say.
Do you know this person? Like,
I wouldn't say no. I've talked to them a couple times online. It's the extent of it.
And this person told you, oh, she's just playing it up. Like, that's basically what the person told you?
Yeah, that like she kind of exaggerates some of her views. Like, they're not as transphobic as they seem.
Not exactly the most moral thing to do, especially knowing that exaggerating this is essentially being a little bit more lenient to transphobia. I would have not known that, and that's a theory. But hearing that comes from like an actual close source, and obviously I can't officially confirm that, but I'm going to take your word for it and let the audience decide for themselves how credible they think it is. But yeah, that really does fascinate me.
I know this video sounds harsh. I know this video sounds like a hit piece, but it's not. I know I've said a lot of negative things about Blaire. That is not my intention. So real quick, I want to mention that there is a lot of good that comes from Blaire's channel and what she does. I think the fact that there is a conservative trans woman is a very positive thing. I think that a lot of conservatives will view her content and see that she has a lot of the similar political views, even if they're not specifically ones that I agree with, and they will view trans women more positively because they can relate to someone like Blaire politically. And I wanted to highlight one thing specifically that I think Blaire does very well.
And speaking for myself and a lot of other transsexuals, it's quite offensive to conflate the desire to be called a bug with the desire to just be called she if I transition.
This clip essentially explains what Blaire White can and should be doing that is positive for trans people. And there's others like this, but this is a good example of it, right? There needs to be someone on YouTube who basically says, hey, bug gender isn't a valid gender identity and we should be calling it out. And hey, there are trans people who don't believe that bug gender is a valid gender identity, and that is important to talk about. See, Blaire doing stuff like this, I fully support 100%. This is a net positive for trans people, and I love that she's doing that. This is what I want to see more of. I'm not asking for Blaire to completely change who she is, because this is something that I would say too. This, in fact, is something that I have said.
You can come up with a new gender, an infinite potential of gender identities, as long as it is socially accepted and recognized in a certain social space.
If anything is valid and that's all you're defining, it's so susceptible to flaws.
Gender is a socially constructed idea revolving around your identity, your presentation, and your pronouns.
Okay, but if someone identifies as an animal and they give themselves different pronouns because of that, I'm just saying, like, it's gotten so freaking ridiculous that I wouldn't even be surprised at this point.
Obviously, I also said some things in that debate that I don't agree with. The debate took place 2 years ago, but it goes to show that there is a place for people like her on YouTube. I don't want her to be deplatformed. This is constructive criticism, not attacking. So now that we have this out of the way, let's get back into more of the constructive criticisms that I have against Blaire White and her YouTube channel. I feel like a lot of times she puts other trans people under the bus in order to preserve her own narrative. And she clearly has a self-awareness to realize that there can be transgender people who are self-destructive, but There are two sides to that coin, and I feel like often Blaire only sees one side and refuses to look in. But again, in the same breath, with every good thing that Blaire does is something equally as harmful. In the same exact video, she talks about how transgender children shouldn't be encouraged to transition.
When a 4-year-old boy comes to you and says, oh, I'm a girl, what he really means is that he wants to do some of the things that girls do, like play with the dollhouse. That's fine, play with the dollhouse, but you're still a boy.
This is absolutely correct. More than likely, they're gay, they're lesbian. And I think there's a real danger in jumping straight to, oh, my child is trans, we're gonna change their name, we're gonna have them dress as a different gender.
When I was 2 years old, I told my parents that I was just a girl. I saw a bunch of specialists when I was clearly presenting gender dysphoria. I was told that it was just a phase. I was never educated that being trans was even an option. I was told I would simply grow out of it, but I never did. And I didn't transition until I was 14 years old. All those years I had bottled up my emotions and my gender dysphoria. I would have been much happier, and years of dysphoria and fear would have been saved. My life would have had a much better outcome had those doctors had simply educated my parents to what gender dysphoria was, and had I been allowed to transition young. I'm not denying that maybe not all kids who experience this will become trans later in life, but these are so young kids, and blockers don't become a factor until a kid turns around 12 years old. If a kid's like 5 or 2 years old, they've got plenty of years to decide for themselves what their gender identity is. There's absolutely no harm in socially transitioning that child and letting that child decide for themselves, is this a gender identity I feel more comfortable with? What there is harm in doing, however, is repressing that gender identity and being told that this isn't who you are, being denied that experience. I know because it happened to me. I know I wish I could have transitioned younger. Maybe Blaire does too. I don't know.
I think there's some transgender people who aren't ready to medically transition. Maybe they have a medical condition, or maybe they're just not sure if they want to. But, they're not transsexual, I guess you could say. But for people who, I knew since I was a kid that this is what I wanted to do. I told my folks when I was 15, but I didn't transition until I was 18. They didn't let me. And to be honest, I don't think they did anything wrong by doing that. I know your parents were super cool and that you transitioned.
Yeah, I got lucky. I mean, they didn't understand, but they were supportive, if that makes sense. It's 2014. No one really knows what being trans is.
What I don't want is to advocate against the needs of transgender children who absolutely need those resources, and I fear that their rights are being stripped away.
A woman is an adult biological female. A trans woman is an adult biological male who presents as a woman visually. This is not a difficult concept. There's a reason why the word trans is in front of woman, because it indicates it is something different.
She is literally stating that there is a distinction between trans women, and that implies that trans women aren't women. She even says that she only really calls herself a woman because it's easier to explain to people.
It is something different. Would I ever be technical and annoying in a real life scenario and call myself a trans woman and just have to be so technically correct that I would never say the word woman? No, but the reality is I'm a trans woman. I was not born a woman. I was not born a girl to age into being a woman. There are so many aspects of womanhood that I cannot relate to.
Blaire White doesn't really see herself as a woman, especially not the same as cisgender women. This baffles me, and it's so sad to watch her feel that way. You are a woman, Blaire. You're not just a transgender woman. You're a woman. You don't need to do this to yourself. You're saying that you can't really be a woman unless you're biologically a woman, using turf argumentations, sympathizing with and using the same rhetoric of trans exclusionary radical feminists. I can't support this. This is just transphobia. How are you siding yourself with and agreeing with a literal transphobe? Just like you did with J.K. Rowling and Dave Chappelle, you're just looking at transphobes saying blatantly transphobic things, and you're saying this is right. And you do it consistently, time and time again.
I feel like people would have less hatred in general if there was more positive representation for trans women. I feel like people would have less hatred if there was any representation for non-binary people.
No.
I feel like that's what leads to all the stereotypes about how they all are freaks who just want to stick out, and you know what I mean? I feel like there should be more positive representation in all directions involving trans people.
This is not the Blaire White that I subscribe to. This is not the sane, conservative trans woman who is standing up for trans rights, but is also calling out some of the more extremes. This is blatant transphobia. Like, that's all you're doing now.
It's incredible because if you like look at her channel, it's so obvious that she's like shoehorning content into a narrative and not the other way around.
Oh, definitely.
Content should always create the narrative, but she starts with the narrative and then makes content for that narrative. And that just tells you that it's a grift. Like, it has to be.
Have you lost sight of being a positive influence to trans people? It's not what this is.
We could dig up their bones 100 years from now. We have no idea what they believed in their head, but we can tell what sex they were.
This is correct.
But anyway, the clips that I just showed you were from a video where Blaire White reacts to a Dr. Phil clip. I mentioned this because in this video and in her other videos, she mentions that she was almost on Dr. Phil. However, she is being purposefully dishonest to her audience about the reasons.
She's always been, like, I guess you could say, like, kind of dishonest. You know, like, I remember when ContraPoints even proved that she lied about reading J.K. Rowling's book, and then it just cracked me up. It's just a strange thing to lie about. Like, honestly, I feel like she could defend J.K. Rowling without having claimed to have read the book, but for some reason she had to lie about reading the book.
She heavily implies in a very dishonest way that I have to imagine she must be aware of too, that the reason the episode was not airing is simply because of how controversial she was.
The reason why it's not going to air, I was told, and I think this is BS, and this is where I have to call BS in drag, but the producers and the show itself, they told me it was legal reasons why they couldn't air me on the show, because in the episode I was discussing people who weren't present on stage. The people I was discussing were my family. Basically, they said that because I had family members that did not show up and they were still discussed, they were not going to air it because it would put them in legal trouble for talking about people who weren't there. And again, I think this is just bullshit. I'm thinking that, and this is just me speculating, I have no way of knowing this for sure. I think that it's possible that they filmed with me and then they kind of looked into more of who I was, and maybe because I'm not necessarily daytime television friendly, they decided it wasn't going to be a good thing to air me. I think it's possible that they disagreed with me politically and that was maybe a motivator. This is just me speculating. I don't know. All I'm left to is my own,
First of all, dubious claim on its own because the Dr. Phil show is filled with way more controversial people than her.
Do you have cancer? Oh my god, do you have cancer? You are such a loser. You're wearing a wig because you're bald. I thought everything I said was funny. I thought it was hilarious. I'll literally take all your cancer money. I'm going to sue you for all your wigs and chemo.
So my question is, Blaire, why do you think that Dr. Phil would be okay with showing that kind of stuff? But in what world is having you on his show too far? Dr. Phil doesn't even strike me as the kind of liberal guy who would want to censor. I mean, this is a guy who sends kids to ranches if they misbehave, right? This isn't exactly someone who is gonna censor a trans woman for being too conservative for a show. I highly doubt this narrative, right? She even begrudgingly admits that the reason that the Dr. Phil show said that the episode wasn't airing is because one of the people in her story didn't consent to being on the show. And yet she acts like this wasn't the real reason, that this is just their explanation, that it didn't matter, which is so silly because she has to know, right? This is a TV show. If someone does not consent to being on the show, you can't put them on the show. It's a violation of laws. They could get sued. You have to get everyone in the story's clearance to be approved to be on TV. If a single person in the story is not cool with their name or story being shared, that cannot air. You might be thinking this is purely speculation. However, it's not, because I had a very similar situation. Long story short, I'm not going to go into the details. In 2018, I was almost on the Dr. Phil show myself. I even have a voicemail of the Dr. Phil producer.
Hi Rose, how's it going? This is calling you from the Dr. Phil show, and I was calling you because I sent you an email on Friday, and I was wondering if you still need help from Dr. Phil. If you do, please respond to the questions that I had there for you, and also pictures of yourself and the people involved in your story.
When I was almost on the Dr. Phil show, I got a call back from a producer and we were in serious talks about moving forward. However, the Dr. Phil show producers, they told me that they needed conflict and that in order to continue forward, they needed to get my parents' permission to be on the show, which is something that they were not interested in. My parents did not want to be on TV. And that's the reason it did not move forward. That's the reason why I winded up never being a part of the Dr. Phil show. So as someone who's been through that experience and knows firsthand, clearly they were not lying about this. It's a very serious legal issue. I saw their paperwork, okay? As someone who's literally been in her mostly exact situation, the producers were not lying. They were telling her honestly, this is something seriously, and clearly, if she's not aware of this, she doesn't know much about the television industry. I think, personally, that she's purposefully spreading disinformation here, or maybe unintentionally so, to kind of spread this victim behavior. She wants to spread this narrative that she's being attacked and being censored when the only reason her episode did not air is because a family member did not consent to being on there and they do not want to get sued for sharing someone's story that did not consent to be on the show. These shows take it very seriously. Clearly, they knew the kind of figure you were going into this. They thrive off that. They thrive off of ratings. They would have loved to have someone as relevant as you on the show because it would have gained them more ratings. I don't respect the dishonesty. So the next thing I want to talk about, kind of the elephant in the room and the absolute worst element about Blaire's content, is her Trans Predator series. And yes, it's a series. There are plenty of videos where she calls out many different individuals for being predators. Surprise! They're all trans. Like, really, Blaire? Do we need to be making every trans predator famous? It's like, no joke. She does not miss a beat. Every time there is a single trans woman who does something criminal, something bad, she has to report it to all of her subscribers. She has to let them know instantly.
What I'm saying is when she has 1 million followers, when she's one of the most famous transgender women in media, and when the most famous trans people a lot of the time are not positive representations. There's very few positive trans role models for trans people to look up to. You know, I think it's inexcusable for her to then be making a bunch of videos about cringy trans people. Ooh, this trans person's a predator. I just think that you're just propagating bigotry. It would be like if D'Angelo Wallace, if he were to like basically be like, ooh, look at this black person being a predator. Ooh, this black man assaulted this young white girl. Like, that's literally what Blaire is doing. You're trans
when you put it like that, you realize how odd the content is.
It is. It's so
like
absurd.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry.
Blaire
that was
is
really
literally
funny.
the
That was a very
trans
good way
Candace
of putting
Owens.
it.
Yeah, and I say that because it's like, when you really think about it, it's just like, this is what you're doing? I mean, trans people barely have rights. Like, in a lot of places, we don't have rights. And like, you're focusing on that. Like, I don't understand that. It's absolutely absurd.
I could reasonably say that these videos are basically TERF propaganda. These videos are literally transphobic propaganda. I do think it's important to know that back in the day, there was this huge amount of racist propaganda, largely forgotten by history, where, you know, newspapers would constantly run stories about young white women being raped by these dangerous predator black men. And these kind of news stories were used as propaganda for laws of segregation to basically, you know, advocate for black people having different restrooms than white people. Does this sound familiar? Because it's literally the same thing that's being used against trans women today. So when you know that history, it makes it even more inexcusable, and it really shines a light to how really backward and horrifying this really is. And it's like, these aren't the exception either. This is like her content now. Over the years, Blaire's only gotten more and more extreme, and every other video has to be disagreeing with trans people, calling out transphobia, defending the transphobes, and basically calling other trans people cringy. Let's laugh at this transgender person because their transition's different from mine.
Well, I really appreciate you giving me this platform to be able to put my 2 cents in about, you know, her views on non-binary people, because she has said, you know, there's only 2 sexes and there's only 2 genders, and that is true. I think biologically You know, even intersex people, they're still designated a birth sex. But, you know, that doesn't change the fact that regardless of whether or not she or everyone else likes it, people with atypical dysphoria do exist. I'm kind of proof that a person can transition in an atypical way. This idea that non-binary people can't transition is just not accurate. It's not rooted in our community's actual experience. And again, it makes me sad that she pushes this misinformation in her videos. And there might be a person watching it who's non-binary who thinks, well, I guess it's just not possible for me to transition. And to me, that makes me sad because nothing made me happier than being able to transition.
And Blaire, here's the thing. When you make these videos, I understand that you want to distance yourself from the awful thing that these people are doing. You want to be seen as the one person who's calling them out because you feel like no one else is. I get that. You want to show that this isn't what trans people are like, that trans people aren't like this. But the problem is that by making all of these videos, you're sending out the message that trans people are like this. This is what most trans people are like. And that leads to people watching these videos being more transphobic than before they started watching your content. And that should terrify you like it terrifies me. You want to send the message that trans women do care about these things. I get it. You feel that there is a need for this content. I completely understand. That is despicable what these people are doing. But do you not see the harm that you're causing? And also, why do you want to platform these awful people anyway? Why do these awful people deserve your attention? We shouldn't be giving them any time of day, any piece of our mind. Why are we platforming those people? Why are we making them famous? You're just promoting an extremely harmful stereotype that's hurting other trans women. Because when people watch your videos, they think of trans women as predators. When someone watches your video, they're going to be more fearful of trans women in the future. You're making it harder for trans women to exist because you're only highlighting the worst examples. If you only highlight the worst examples and only showcase the absolute bottom of the barrel, when these people have barely any exposure to good trans people, you might, but your audience doesn't. You're gonna make these people believe that trans women are scary, that trans women aren't deserving of access to these spaces or having basic human rights. It's hurting us. Blaire has just become a bully. This is literally what she is now. I have uncovered evidence that no one else has ever talked about on YouTube from somebody who has been featured by Blaire White herself, has been made fun of on her channel for being one of the cringy trans people. And in private, Blaire said the most nasty transphobic things to this person. And I wanted to highlight and showcase this on my channel to show the true dangers and horrors of what Blaire is capable of.
And I just tweeted like something that I didn't even think would upset her. I just said, I really think it would be helpful if you moved the conversation forward and would just stop talking about the same things over and over again, because it's just redundant. And she like replied in the tweet, and like, I don't know what she said, but she was calling me names. And then she blocked me. And then it escalated to beyond being on Twitter. Somehow it went to Snapchat. I don't even know how that happened. I hit her up and I wanted to talk about it because I was like, all right, let's handle this like adults. And you could see that in the video recording of the Snapchat.
Do you want me to read some of these messages? Because I was like, right, I have my own like thoughts on Blaire. But regardless, I was shocked to see like this blatant transphobia come from her. Do you want me to just read the conversation?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you not want to? You basically say, can we please talk like mature adults, to where Blaire says, you're a man. And then you respond, why are you calling me that? I literally present as female, lol, it makes no sense. And she says, okay, dude. And then, here's the thing, right? I know this is legit because I've done the same thing. You send photos of yourself being like, look at how feminine I look. I've done this before with transphobic people who've misgendered me. So that's how I'm like, I know it's like, this is exactly how I would respond to the situation. And so you're basically like, literally, how the fuck do I look like a man? And Blaire says, I see a man. She has nothing else better to do, really? And then you say, how lol, I literally pass. Like, aren't you trans? Like, how the fuck are you gonna call me a man? And then Blaire says, you don't pass at all. And then you're like, how? And Blaire says, just an angry, obsessed man. And then you're like, well, strangers call me she, right? And Blaire's like, sorry, bro. Again, insistent on this, right? And you're like, okay, what's your issue? Dead ass. Like, how do you look any more like a female than me? Okay, I don't agree with you there. that? Like, you're like, oh, at least they look more natural than you. Like, honestly, surgery's valid. But then she's like, because you're a fat guy who looks like a fat guy, completely male. I don't know what SRT means. And then you send more pictures. Again, I've done the same thing. And you're like, the bottom one is before you transitioned and you haven't even been on hormones for a year. And Blaire's like, you look exactly the same. The hormones haven't done shit. You look extremely male and act like it too. Oh yeah, and I want to mention this.
Okay, disclaimer, I do not condone the stuff that Janae Rose says here. I just want to make that perfectly clear because I know some people will see this video and think that I'm just platforming Janae. The reason I interviewed her is because she specifically had these screenshots claiming Blaire misgendered her, and I wanted to get her experience because she was featured in a Blaire White video, right? Just because I'm featuring her here does not mean that I agree with the stuff she's saying. So you're gonna hear some stuff in this interview that Janae says. Just know that I do not support it at all.
She mentions the threatening to beat women up. It's embarrassing. Your behavior online towards me is unhinged. You need to reassess your life. So she's saying this, and I think I remember because she like made a video, or she mentioned you in a video or something, right? I think the basis of this was like something you got into some drama. I don't fully remember, but you made some comment like, oh, don't come to Chicago. Do you remember saying that?
Yeah. I said she can't come to Chicago, and if she does, like, it'll be a problem.
Don't come to Chicago, bitch. And so I'm like, all right, this. She can't come to Chicago no more. You know, I'm a rapper.
I can't come to Chicago because I blocked you on Twitter. Janae, the mayor of Chicago, has now banned me. So, anyways,
I can see why she would like read something like that and be like concerned. Like, I don't think that was cool. And I think what you're doing is you're literally just giving her ammo to be like, look at these cringe like this person's threatening my life. You're making her look like a victim, which sucks because that's like the opposite of the truth, right?
Yeah.
But when you say things like that, I mean, do you understand how that's going to be taken as like, oh my God, this person is threatening me? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't condone what you said, but at the same time, it's like, I do understand that like what she's saying is not cool, right?
Yeah, no, I totally get it.
Okay.
I understand how people see it. At the end of the day, I've never been really concerned about how people see me. It is what it is.
I would hope that you wouldn't actually do something like that, right? And that's just all like talk. And I don't agree with what you said, but like, I understand being upset because of like, you know, this nasty shit that she's saying, especially looking at what she's saying to you now, right?
Yeah.
But that's all I'm going to discuss. I just wanted to address real quick that the whole comment, right? And so you're basically like, I'm from the hood. You want to talk to any other cis girls? I know because they're the same. And basically it's true. Like, there are cis women who can be physical. They don't get treated like transphobic, right? Whereas if a trans woman does it, it's like, oh my God, this trans woman is acting so masculine. Oh, she just acted male. Meanwhile, like, cis women do it all the time, and it's like a double standard. Like, I think that that's a valid thing, right?
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
And then Blaire says, stop asking me if you look male. The answer is yes. And again, I've so many freaking people who online have done this shit. It just reminds me of these conversations I've had with other people online. That's why it bothers me. And then you send a picture of someone you know. Again, I can totally see why she'd be worried about this. And I don't think you should have brought it there. But again, it doesn't excuse what she said. And it's like, regardless of the context, what she's saying to you is just not okay.
Okay, once again, let me clarify. I absolutely am against violence. I am a pacifist. What I was saying is that trans women who commit violence are subjected to a lot more transphobia and bigotry, opposed to cis women who do. Obviously, all violence is evil and disgusting, and I do not support these messages. I think that in this situation, both people were in the wrong. To be clear, Janae's in the wrong and Blaire's in the wrong, and one of them being wrong does not negate the other being wrong.
And it's like, she has 1 million subscribers. Like, why is she picking a fight with? I just don't understand, like, in her logic. I think she only is doing this because she wants to cry, oh, look at me, I'm the victim. Look at these crazy trans. Like, that's literally like what her mind is. Like, in my opinion, that's what she's doing when she's like doing this right now. And why she mentioned you in her video. And Blaire says, and she looks like a woman, you don't, bully behavior. And then you're like, that's not a male thing, but how? Blaire's like, right, but you're a man. You say you passed really well. And again, you're like talking about like all the surgery she got, which is like, I understand the point you're trying to make. And I understand that cis women do have plastic surgery, right? Like the Kardashians, people say all the time, like, oh, the Kardashians look like plastic. And I guess that's what you're trying to say. Like, in your eyes, it's not transphobic, but at the same time, it's like,
trans. It's just the look. It's just like the aesthetic. Like, it's.
I understand what you're saying. It's not something that I would personally say, and I don't think it's a huge deal in the world. And this is coming right after she's literally insulting you, saying you look like a man and shit.
Okay, final time I'm interrupting the interview, I promise. But I am very pro-surgery, and I honestly think that like the way that Janae was like talking about Blaire and her surgery was really messed up, especially because so many trans women go through surgery. And I think it's such an amazing thing that allows trans women to look more beautiful, look more like the women that we are. So to clown someone for having a surgery that, I mean, obviously Blaire's surgery has helped the way that she views herself. It's alleviated her dysphoria and it's done a lot of good. So another thing I absolutely do not agree with her on.
And then Blaire again says, you literally do not pass it all. Like, not even a little bit. You're delusional as fuck. And then you're like, well, I'm happy with my looks and I think I'm pretty and I'm very proud of how far I've came. Have a nice night. Like, have a nice night. After all, I'm sorry. I just had to do the dramatic reading just because of how unbelievable these messages are. And that's another thing. Like, I'm sure someone's going to watch this video and they're going to be like, oh, Rose, these messages are obviously fake. You know, how are you entertaining this? So like, what's your rebuttal? What would your rebuttal be to anyone who says that you fake these screenshots?
I did a literal screen recording and I showed like my Snapchat. I showed my recent chats and everything. And then I went to the subscription area and showed that like it's her official account. And like I showed all of it. It'd be pretty hard for me to fake that. I mean, I don't know if it's possible or not, but I certainly don't know how to do it.
No, and that's the thing.
It's a stretch. It's a stretch because like I literally go on the whole app and like it's not just a chat. It's not just one chat.
Because the thing is, when people, if people fake a screenshot, they take like a photo, like a picture, right? And then they go like edit it digitally on their computer. Whereas that's not what you're doing. It's really hard to like edit a video that comes straight from an iPhone, and you do all the things. You show her profile, and that's what I would do if I was trying to prove. Like, as someone who has online experience, I can say with pretty, confidence that, this seems legit to me and this like matches Blaire's behavior to me. However, I'm just saying this for the people watching this video who are thinking like, oh, these screenshots are fake, or the people who are still defending Blaire, who don't think she would do something like this, where despite the fact that she's had her behavior that's like clearly she's not behind putting other trans women down, like she does that all the time. I can't support her if she's doing all this shit. Like, it's just unbelievable.
Okay, so some people might point out that like there has been a previous instance of someone video faking a Blaire White DM, and I can understand that rebuttal to this. So obviously take everything said here with a grain of salt. Janae might not be the most reliable narrator, but for what I know about Janae, if it's possible to fake a video screenshot like the one she recorded, Janae would not have those abilities to do what would need to be done. So I can say with pretty good confidence that this is real, but obviously nothing can be confirmed. Blaire has no shame, no regret in misgendering a transgender woman who she believes is not good enough for her. If you do not fit her standards or you insult her in some way, you are not seen as a valid trans woman to her. You're a man in her eyes. That's what she said to transgender YouTuber Janae Rose. But also, I want to mention that Blaire has lied about Janae in the past as well.
So this person actually tried calling into a radio show I was doing while it was live. This person's really, really obsessed with me.
Okay. All right, well, for sure. All right, well, I got some questions for you from the Instagram.
Give me a drink.
The Instagram followers.
Instagram's nicer than Twitter, though. Twitter is where the question's going to be like, so when are you going to kill yourself?
Oh, God.
Oh, my God.
I've been using that block filter so much.
Same.
I love it.
It's my favorite.
It's so amazing.
All right, well, like we said, there was a diss track towards you.
Into a radio show I was doing while it was live. This person's really, really obsessed.
Hey, speaking of transgender diss tracks.
There's more?
Well, do you remember when...
It's my favorite genre.
Do you remember? This person actually tried calling into a radio show I was doing while it was live.
Janae did not call into this show. This was simply being talked about by the people on the show. She has a huge platform, and she is blatantly, without a doubt, spreading misinformation, distorting events. There is no excuse. So, we've covered a lot in this video, and I understand it's a lot to get through. I've uncovered many things that Blaire has done that I personally believe to be despicable. I've interviewed several people about how they feel like they've been harmed personally and from a distance by Blaire and her actions. And unless she changes I do generally worry about the impact that she's having. As I've said, this is not a negative video. Despite everything that I've said, I want the best for her. Because like I said, I see myself in Blaire. I know what it's like. I used to be a fan of hers. I used to love what she was doing. And I hope that she can find a positive voice for herself without having to tear down other trans women in the progress. I want nothing else for Blaire to feel loved and accepted, but not at the expense of other trans women. Blaire, if you're watching this video, I would love to have a conversation with you. Despite what you may think, I'm not a hater. I would love to just have a chat, maybe interview you, hear your thoughts. I hope that you can see that I'm not coming from bad faith. I want to be as charitable as possible to you. I hope that we could have a good discussion about the content that you're posting and how it's impacting the trans community. And I hope that in your future videos, you can try to keep this in mind, what you're posting. Because I believe that you can be a voice for good. You have that in you, and you have been before, but I feel like you've lost your way, and I hate to see that for you. But for now, as it stands, it seems to me like you haven't learned anything.
If Blaire happens to be watching this video, like, is there anything you'd want to say to her?
Yeah, like, I'd love to talk to her. I just want her to be genuine. I mean, I think she could be great for trans people if she was just genuine. But it's so obvious that everything about her is fake. And I get it. If you want to just make money, that's fine. But I feel like this is too serious. Like, trans people are marginalized, and there's a lot of people that are trying to pass laws right now that discriminate against us. So we need her to stand up and be real.
Exactly.
This is serious shit. This is our lives.
Anyway, it's Rose Millet. Thank you for watching. This video was 2 years in the making, required a lot of work, 2 separate interviews, entangled with my own thoughts and commentary. And if you appreciate this high quality work, I really want to step up my YouTube game in 2022. Please subscribe to this channel, share this video, like this video. It really means a lot. Simply by watching to the end, it helps the algorithm recommend this. Leave a comment, engage with this video if you agreed or disagreed, let me know why. I really just want this to be a positive place for conversation. I will respond to your comments. I will have honest conversations, even if we disagree. Anyway, I plan to be releasing a lot more videos this year, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you. It's Rose Millet. Bye.
Thank you so much for being a part of this video. Do you have any socials you want to promote, or do you not want me to promote your socials?
Promote my Twitter, Minecraft5Ever1.
All right, thank you for being on my channel. It was really great talking to you and hearing your perspective.
Thank you, and you're a good friend, and I'm really glad that I can have a platform.
Aw,
Have a good one.
Okay, you too. Thank you, Janae. Is there anything you want to say, like anything you want to promote? Obviously, if you give me links, I'll put them in the description, but anything you want to, like, you know, your channel or something, I don't know, like your socials.
Yeah. So it's Janae Rose on YouTube and Janae_Rose1 on Instagram. If you go to my YouTube, you can find all of my links in my bio and everything. If you just Google Janae Rose rapper, I'll come up too, and all my social medias will come up.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was really nice talking to you.
It was great. No problem.
Chris Hansen here. I have a message for you, Rose Mullet. Thank you for the wonderful entertainment you have provided us with. I'm going to need you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Rose Mullet.
Warning, very sad. Why don't I have 1 million subs yet? This isn't fair, give me subs. If you wanted sandwiches, you could have just asked. Or you could subscribe to Rose Mullet's channel. I think I'll take the sandwiches.
Is this really what you wanted, what you wanted? Give me everything and treat me like it's nothing. Is it nothing? It's the party in the Illuminati. If you really think it, tell me, is it what it? And if you think it is what you wanted, everybody is wondering why.